Welcome to Raven Reports. I'm your host, Morgan Blackwood, and tonight we're diving into a story that will make you question how quickly a single decision can spiral out of control. This is She Left Her Baby in the Car for a Date. Hours later, police broke the windows open. Before we begin, remember to like this video and subscribe to Raven Reports for more crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Tonight's story is particularly haunting because it reminds us how even ordinary people can make devastating choices in moments of weakness. It shows us how the desire for connection and escape can cloud judgment in ways that have life-altering consequences. And it forces us to ask ourselves, what would I have done in this situation? Could I have been vulnerable to the same mistakes? The answers might not be as simple as we'd like to believe. Meadowbrook Heights was the kind of suburb where people moved to escape the chaos of the city. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and a sense of community that made residents feel safe. It was the last place anyone expected a story like this to unfold. The neighborhood prided itself on its excellent schools and low crime rate. Young families flocked there for the pristine parks and community events, summer concerts on the green, 4th of July fireworks, autumn harvest festivals where children could pick pumpkins and drink apple cider. In Meadowbrook Heights, neighbors knew each other's names and watched out for one another's children. At least, that's what the brochures promised. For 26-year-old Eliza Winters, Meadowbrook Heights represented a fresh start. A single mother to 14-month-old Lily, Eliza had moved to the neighborhood 6 months earlier following her divorce from Lily's father, Mark. The split had been messy, with accusations flying from both sides, but they had eventually settled on a custody arrangement that gave Eliza primary custody, while Mark had visitation every other weekend. The divorce had blindsided Eliza. She and Mark had been college sweethearts, married right after graduation with dreams of building a life together. They'd bought a starter home, adopted a rescue dog named Baxter, and planned for children. When Eliza discovered she was pregnant, they'd painted the nursery together, Mark carefully stenciling clouds on the ceiling while Eliza arranged stuffed animals in the crib. But something changed after Lily was born. Mark started working later hours, growing distant and irritable. When Eliza finally confronted him, he confessed to an affair with a co-worker, a relationship that had been going on for months. The betrayal shattered Eliza's world. Suddenly, she was alone with a 3-month-old baby, her identity as a wife stripped away, leaving only the overwhelming responsibility of motherhood. She'd sold their house in the divorce, unable to afford the mortgage on her own, and moved to Meadowbrook Heights because the school district was good and the rent for a 2-bedroom apartment was just within her budget. Eliza worked as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company. The job paid enough to cover the rent on her modest apartment and childcare expenses, but not much else. Her social life had essentially disappeared when Lily was born, and between work and motherhood, Eliza often felt isolated and overwhelmed. Each morning began before dawn, with Eliza rushing to prepare bottles and pack diaper bags before dropping Lily at Little Explorers Daycare by 7:30 a.m. The daycare was expensive, nearly half of Eliza's monthly salary, but it was the only one within reasonable distance that had openings and good reviews. She would kiss Lily goodbye, trying to ignore the baby's tears and outstretched arms, then drive to Meadowbrook Insurance Associates, where she would spend 8 hours answering phones, scheduling appointments, and filing paperwork. In the evenings, she would pick Lily up by 5:30 p.m., incurring late fees if she was even 5 minutes behind, then hurry home to prepare dinner, give Lily a bath, and try to maintain some semblance of a bedtime routine. After Lily was asleep, Eliza would fold laundry, wash bottles, and prepare for the next day before collapsing into bed, often too exhausted to even watch TV. On weekends, she'd catch up on housework, grocery shopping, and try to give Lily the undivided attention she couldn't provide during the week. Friends from her pre-baby life had gradually stopped calling. Their invitations to happy hours and weekend getaways were met with repeated refusals until eventually they stopped coming altogether. Her coworkers were friendly, but mostly older women with grown children who offered well-meaning but often outdated advice.
Being a single parent isn't just hard because of the logistics, she would later tell investigators. It's the loneliness that really gets to you. Everyone else your age is out living their lives, and you're stuck at home watching Peppa Pig for the 1000th time. You start to forget who you were before you became a mom. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back at you. And the guilt. The guilt is constant.
If you're focusing on work, you feel guilty for not being with your child. If you're with your child, you worry about not advancing your career. If you take even a moment for yourself, you feel selfish. It's like being trapped in a room where the walls keep closing in, and you can't remember what fresh air feels like anymore. The detective interviewing her had nodded sympathetically, but Eliza could see the judgment in her eyes. How could any mother, no matter how lonely or overwhelmed, ever leave her baby alone in a car? It was the same question Eliza would ask herself every day for years to come. This loneliness would prove to be the catalyst for the events that unfolded on Friday, April 17th. The day had begun like any other. The same morning rush, the same struggles to get Lily dressed as she squirmed and protested, the same hurried drive to daycare. At work, Eliza had processed insurance claims and fielded calls from frustrated customers, counting down the hours until she could leave. But that afternoon, something shifted. Her coworker, Denise, had stopped by her desk to show off photos from her daughter's wedding the previous weekend. "Your time will come again, honey," Denise had said, patting Eliza's hand. "But enjoy these baby years, they go by so fast." Eliza had nodded and smiled, but inside she felt a flash of resentment. Easy for Denise to say, with her comfortable empty nest and husband of 30 years. Denise had no idea what it was like to face decades of parenting alone, to wonder if she'd ever feel like more than just someone's mother again. 3 weeks earlier, Eliza had downloaded a dating app. At first, she'd just browsed profiles during Lily's naps, telling herself she was just curious about what was out there. But eventually, she began messaging with a few men. Most conversations fizzled quickly once they learned she had a child. Not looking to be a stepdad, one had written bluntly before unmatching. Others suggested late-night hookups that made Eliza feel cheap and desperate. Then she matched with James Harrington. His profile said he was 31, a marketing executive who enjoyed hiking, cooking, and classic films. His photos showed a tall, dark-haired man with an easy smile, sometimes posed with a golden retriever, sometimes standing on mountain peaks. Unlike the other men, James asked thoughtful questions and actually seemed interested in her answers. When she mentioned being a mother, he didn't disappear. Instead, he shared that he'd been raised by a single mom himself and had tremendous respect for women who took on that challenge. "My mom was my hero," he wrote. "She worked 2 jobs to put me through college, never complained, and still managed to make it to all my baseball games. Women like her and you amaze me." It was exactly what Eliza needed to hear. After weeks of feeling invisible and undesirable, here was someone who seemed to see her value, who understood her struggles. Their messages grew longer and more frequent. They discovered shared interests in true crime podcasts and 90s alternative music. They joked about their mutual dislike of cilantro and reality TV. For the first time in months, Eliza felt a flutter of excitement when her phone chimed with a notification. James was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know Eliza. Unlike other matches who ghosted her after learning she had a child, James didn't seem bothered by it. After 2 weeks of constant messaging, he suggested they meet for dinner at Emilio's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. "I know it might be hard with your daughter," he wrote, "but I'd really love to see you in person. I feel like we've connected in a way I haven't experienced in a long time. Just a couple of hours to see if this chemistry translates face to face. What do you say?" Eliza had stared at the message, heart pounding. Emilio's was the kind of place she'd dreamed of going. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, waiters who refilled your water without being asked. Before Lily, before the divorce, it was the type of restaurant where Mark might have taken her for an anniversary. Now it represented everything she'd been missing: sophistication, romance, adult conversation that didn't revolve around diaper brands or sleep training. "I'd love to," she replied, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. "Let me see what I can arrange for childcare." "Perfect," James responded almost immediately. "How about Friday at 7:30? I'll make the reservation. Can't wait to finally meet you, Eliza." Looking at his message, Eliza felt a mix of exhilaration and panic. Friday was just 3 days away. She needed to find a babysitter, figure out what to wear, maybe even get a haircut. But underneath the logistical concerns was a deeper anxiety. What if he didn't like her in person? What if she'd forgotten how to have a normal adult conversation? What if this was all a terrible mistake? Despite her doubts, she'd responded with a simple, "Friday at 7:30 sounds perfect. Looking forward to it." Then she'd immediately opened her contacts to start the search for a babysitter. There was just one problem. It was a Friday night, and Mark wasn't scheduled to take Lily until the following weekend. Eliza's usual babysitter, her neighbor Mrs. Patel, was out of town visiting her daughter. And Eliza's mother, who lived an hour away, was recovering from knee surgery and couldn't help. Eliza spent Wednesday evening and most of Thursday making calls and sending texts to everyone she could think of. Her co-worker Denise had plans with her husband. The college student down the hall who sometimes watched Lily in emergencies was going home for the weekend. The mother of Lily's playdate friend had her in-laws visiting. Each rejection increased Eliza's desperation. She considered canceling the date and even drafted a message to James explaining the situation. But her finger hovered over the send button, unable to complete the action. The thought of returning to her lonely routine, of giving up this chance at connection, felt unbearable. On Thursday night, after putting Lily to bed, Eliza sat on her couch scrolling through babysitting apps. But the few available sitters had no reviews or wanted rates she couldn't afford. She thought about asking Mark to take Lily a week early, but their relationship was still too raw, too bitter. He would ask questions, make assumptions, perhaps even use her dating life against her in future custody discussions. Eliza poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the dark of her living room, listening to Lily's soft breathing through the baby monitor. The walls of her small apartment seemed to close in around her. Was this really all there would be for years to come? Work, childcare, sleep, repeat. No adult conversation, no romance, no glimpse of the woman she used to be. Eliza considered canceling, but something stopped her. Later, when asked about this moment, she would say, "I just wanted one night to feel normal again. One night where I wasn't just Lily's mom, but a woman with her own life. I'd spent so long putting everyone else first. My baby, my ex, my boss, my clients. Just once, I wanted to be selfish. Just once, I wanted to feel like the old Eliza, the one who went on dates and wore heels and talked about something other than diaper rash. I was drowning in motherhood, and this date felt like coming up for air. I knew it was wrong to even think about what I eventually did, but in that moment, the need to escape was stronger than my common sense." The detective had looked at her skeptically. "Stronger than your love for your child?" Eliza had shaken her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, never stronger than that. That's what makes this so hard to live with. I love Lily more than anything in this world. I would die for her without hesitation. But that night, I made a choice that put her at risk, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Love and poor judgment can exist in the same heart. That's the terrible truth I have to live with." So Eliza began to formulate a plan. A plan that would change everything. It started as a fleeting thought, a desperate solution that she initially dismissed. But as Friday morning arrived and she still had no childcare options, the idea returned with more persistence. She recalled an article she'd read about how deeply babies sleep, especially after their bedtime routine. Lily was a good sleeper. Once she was out, she usually stayed asleep for at least 6 hours without stirring, and her car seat was designed to be comfortable, supporting her head and body in a safe sleeping position. What if, just this once, she put Lily to sleep a little early and brought her along? The baby would sleep in her car seat while Eliza had dinner with James. She could park close to the restaurant, check on Lily regularly through the baby monitor app on her phone, and be back within 2 hours. Lily would never even know she'd left the apartment. The more Eliza thought about it, the more she convinced herself it could work. She'd crack the windows for air circulation. The April evening wouldn't be too cold or too hot. She'd park in a well-lit area with security cameras. It would just be for a short time, surely no different than when Lily slept in the car during longer drives. A voice in the back of her mind screamed that this was dangerous, irresponsible, possibly even illegal. But Eliza silenced it with rationalizations and the desperate need to reclaim a piece of her former self, if only for one evening. That Friday, she left work early to prepare. She cleaned the car, making sure the car seat was securely installed. She packed an extra blanket, Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, and a small clip-on fan to ensure good air circulation. She set up the baby monitor camera that would connect to her phone, testing it multiple times to make sure it worked properly. In her mind, she was being cautious, responsible, not like those parents who carelessly left their children in hot cars while they went shopping. The reservation at Emilio's was for 7:30 p.m. Eliza's routine with Lily was predictable: dinner at 6, bath at 6:30, and bedtime by 7. The baby usually slept soundly through the night in her crib. Eliza thought, what if she put Lily to bed a little early, in her car seat instead of her crib? The baby would sleep through dinner, and Eliza could check on her during the date if needed. It was a terrible idea. Eliza knew it was a terrible idea. But in that moment, the desire to reclaim some semblance of her former life overwhelmed her better judgment. At 6 p.m., Eliza fed Lily dinner as usual. She gave her a quick bath, dressed her in warm pajamas, and strapped her into her car seat. She placed Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit beside her and covered her with a light blanket. The baby was already drowsy, her eyelids heavy. "I'll just be gone for an hour or two," Eliza told herself as she carried the car seat out to her Honda Civic. "She'll sleep the whole time and no one will ever know." The early April evening was cool but not cold, around 60 degrees. Eliza parked her car in the restaurant's underground parking garage, choosing a spot near the security camera. She cracked the windows slightly, locked the doors, and hurried inside to meet James. James Harrington was even more handsome in person than in his profile pictures. Tall, with dark hair and an easy smile, he greeted Eliza with a warm hug that lingered just long enough to send a flutter through her chest. He'd already secured a table and ordered a bottle of wine. "You look stunning," he said as he pulled out her chair. "Even better than your pictures." Eliza blushed, suddenly conscious of the spit-up stain she'd hastily covered with a scarf. When was the last time someone had called her stunning? When was the last time she'd felt stunning? As they settled into conversation, Eliza found herself relaxing. James was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in her work and her life. He didn't press when she glossed over details about her personal life, and he made her laugh in a way she hadn't in months. One glass of wine turned into 2, and their meal stretched from appetizers to entrees to dessert. Eliza checked her phone discreetly every 20 minutes or so. No alerts from the baby monitor app she'd set up in the car. Lily must still be sleeping peacefully. By the time they finished dessert, it was 9:45 p.m., over 2 hours since Eliza had left Lily in the car. A flicker of guilt passed through her, but James was suggesting they continue the evening at a cocktail bar around the corner. "Just one drink," he promised with that smile that made her stomach flip. "I'm not ready to say goodnight yet." Eliza hesitated. She should check on Lily. She should end the date and take her baby home. But James was already signaling for the check, his hand brushing hers across the table. "One drink," she agreed. What Eliza didn't know as she and James walked to the cocktail bar was that at 9:30 p.m., 15 minutes earlier, 24-year-old parking attendant Miguel Reyes had been making his rounds through the garage when he thought he heard crying coming from a parked Honda Civic. Miguel approached the car and peered through the slightly open window. Inside, he could see a baby, red-faced and screaming, strapped into a car seat. There was no adult in sight. Miguel immediately called his supervisor, who instructed him to contact the police. At 9:38 p.m., Officer Sarah Chen and her partner, Officer Marcus Davis, responded to the call. When the officers arrived, they found Miguel standing by the car. The baby inside was clearly in distress, crying hysterically, her face flushed, her pajamas soaked with sweat despite the cool evening. The car was locked, and we could see the baby was in serious distress, Officer Chen would later testify. "We attempted to locate the owner by having the restaurant make an announcement, but when no one came forward and the baby's condition appeared to be worsening, we made the decision to break the window to remove her from the vehicle." At 9:52 p.m., Officer Davis used his baton to break the passenger side window of Eliza's Honda Civic. Officer Chen carefully reached in, unlocked the door, and removed Lily from the car seat. The baby was hot to the touch, dehydrated, and extremely agitated. Even though the car was in a garage and the evening wasn't particularly warm, the temperature inside the vehicle was significantly elevated, Officer Chen explained. A car can heat up surprisingly quickly, even in moderate weather, and this baby had clearly been alone for some time. An ambulance was called, and Lily was transported to Meadowbrook General Hospital for evaluation and treatment. Meanwhile, Eliza was sipping a cocktail at the Velvet Room, laughing at a story James was telling about his college days. Her phone, silenced for their romantic evening, showed multiple missed calls from an unknown number, but it was buried in her purse, unnoticed. It wasn't until 10:45 p.m., after she'd excused herself to use the restroom and checked her phone, that Eliza saw the missed calls. She also had a voicemail from Officer Chen explaining that her baby had been found alone in her car and taken to the hospital. The world seemed to tilt beneath Eliza's feet. She gripped the edge of the sink to steady herself, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she done? How had a quick dinner turned into 3 hours away from her baby? Eliza stumbled back to the table, her face drained of color. "I have to go," she told James, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's an emergency." James insisted on calling her an Uber, but Eliza barely registered his concern. As soon as the car arrived, she jumped in and directed the driver to Meadowbrook General, leaving James confused on the sidewalk. When Eliza burst into the pediatric emergency department at 11:08 p.m., she was met by Officer Chen and a hospital social worker named Diane Lopez. Before they would let her see Lily, they insisted on asking her some questions. "Where were you while your daughter was alone in the car?" Officer Chen asked, her voice professional but cold. Eliza's explanation came out in a jumble of excuses and apologies. She had only meant to be gone for an hour. She thought Lily would sleep through it. She'd checked the baby monitor app, but there must have been a connection issue. She lost track of time. "Ms. Winters, leaving a child unattended in a vehicle is a criminal offense," Officer Chen informed her. "Your daughter could have died tonight." The word "died" hit Eliza like a physical blow. She doubled over, a sob tearing from her throat. "Please," she begged, "please let me see her. I need to see my baby." After consulting with the doctor, they allowed Eliza into the treatment room where Lily was being monitored. The baby was sleeping now, an IV delivering fluids to treat her dehydration. A nurse explained that while Lily's condition had stabilized, they wanted to keep her overnight for observation. Eliza collapsed into the chair beside the hospital crib, reaching through the bars to touch her daughter's small hand. How could she have done this? What kind of mother was she? But her moment of remorse was short-lived. At 11:45 p.m., Officer Chen returned with Officer Davis. They informed Eliza that she was being placed under arrest for child endangerment, a felony that carried a possible sentence of up to 6 years in prison. As the officers led a handcuffed Eliza from the hospital, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She wasn't just facing criminal charges. She would likely lose custody of Lily. Her life as she knew it was over, all because she had prioritized a date over her child's safety. Eliza spent the night in a holding cell at the Meadowbrook Heights police station. In the morning, she was allowed to make phone calls. The first was to her mother, Catherine, who was shocked and horrified but promised to come right away. The second was to an attorney recommended by a sympathetic booking officer. Meanwhile, Child Protective Services had been notified and had placed Lily in temporary custody with Catherine once the baby was discharged from the hospital. Mark, Eliza's ex-husband, was also notified and immediately filed for emergency custody. 3 days later, Eliza was released on bail with strict conditions including supervised visitation with Lily and mandatory parenting classes. As she left the courthouse with her attorney, a small group of reporters and onlookers had gathered. Someone shouted, "Bad mother," and others joined in with similar taunts. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. "Mother leaves baby in car for date night." Social media exploded with outrage. Strangers called for Eliza to lose her parental rights permanently. Others suggested she deserved jail time. In the midst of this public shaming, few people knew the full story that would emerge during the investigation and subsequent trial. James Harrington, the charming date who had so captivated Eliza, was not who he claimed to be. His real name was Jason Harding, and he had a history of targeting vulnerable single mothers on dating apps. Detective Rachel Morgan, assigned to Eliza's case, became suspicious when she interviewed James Jason about the evening. His story contained small inconsistencies, and his concern for Eliza seemed performative rather than genuine. A background check revealed that Jason had been investigated twice before for similar situations in neighboring counties. His pattern was to charm single mothers, encourage them to make poor decisions regarding their children, and then disappear when the consequences hit. In one case, he had convinced a mother to leave her children home alone overnight, resulting in a kitchen fire when the oldest child attempted to cook breakfast. We believe Mr. Harding derives satisfaction from manipulating women into neglecting their children, Detective Morgan explained. He specifically seeks out single mothers who appear stressed or isolated, builds their trust quickly, and then tests the boundaries of their parental responsibility. While this revelation didn't excuse Eliza's decision, it did provide important context. Text messages recovered from Eliza's phone showed Jason subtly encouraging her to find a way to make the date work, despite her childcare issues. "Kids sleep so deeply at that age," he had written. "I'm sure you could figure something out for just a couple of hours." Further investigation revealed that Jason had spiked Eliza's drinks throughout the evening, not with enough alcohol to incapacitate her, but enough to impair her judgment and time perception. A toxicology screen performed when she was arrested showed her blood alcohol content was significantly higher than what would be expected from the 2 glasses of wine and 1 cocktail she remembered consuming. The restaurant's security footage also showed Jason discreetly adding something to Eliza's drinks when she visited the restroom. While the substance couldn't be identified after the fact, experts suggested it was likely a benzodiazepine like Xanax, which can enhance the effects of alcohol and cause time disorientation. "We believe Mr. Harding deliberately prolonged the date and impaired Ms. Winter's judgment," Detective Morgan stated. "While she made the initial poor decision to leave her child unattended, evidence suggests she was manipulated and drugged, preventing her from checking on her baby as she had planned." Jason Harding was arrested 2 weeks after Eliza, charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor, administering a drug to commit a felony, and reckless endangerment. He was held without bail due to flight risk concerns. As these details emerged, public opinion began to shift slightly. Some still condemned Eliza's initial decision, but others recognized the complex factors at play. Single mothers, in particular, came forward to discuss the isolation and desperation that can accompany raising a child alone. "I'm not defending what she did," said one mother in an interview with the local news, "but I understand the loneliness that might have made her vulnerable to someone like Jason Harding. When you're a single parent, especially with a young child, you can go days without adult conversation. You lose your identity, and that makes you an easy target for manipulation." For Eliza, the revelation about Jason brought a complicated mix of emotions. On one hand, knowing she had been deliberately manipulated and drugged helped explain her uncharacteristic behavior that night. On the other hand, she still had to face the fact that she had made the initial decision to leave Lily alone. "I don't blame Jason for my choice," she told her attorney. "I blame him for making it worse, for keeping me away longer than I intended. But I'm the one who put Lily in that car. That's on me, and I have to live with it." 6 months after that fateful night, both Eliza and Jason faced their respective trials. Jason Harding was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in prison. The judge cited his pattern of targeting vulnerable women and endangering children as factors in the harsh sentence. Additionally, investigators in other jurisdictions were building cases against him for similar behaviors. Eliza's case was more complex. The district attorney, recognizing the mitigating factors, offered a plea deal, guilty to a reduced charge of misdemeanor child endangerment with a sentence of 2 years probation, mandatory parenting classes, and therapy. During her sentencing hearing, Eliza addressed the court, her voice steady despite her tears. "What I did was inexcusable," she said. "Regardless of the manipulation I experienced, I made the choice to leave my daughter alone. I prioritized my desires over her safety, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. I can only thank God that Lily wasn't permanently harmed by my selfishness." She continued, I've spent these past months working to understand why I made that choice, and how to ensure I never make a similar mistake again. I love my daughter more than anything in this world, and I am committed to being the mother she deserves. The judge, while stern in his admonishment, acknowledged the unusual circumstances of the case. "Ms. Winters, your actions that night could have resulted in tragedy," he said. "However, I also recognize that you were targeted and manipulated by a predator who has done this before. This does not excuse your decision, but it does inform the court's sentencing." In addition to accepting the plea deal terms, the judge ordered Eliza to speak at parenting classes about the dangers of leaving children unattended and the importance of vetting childcare options. The custody battle with Mark proved equally challenging. While he had initially pushed for full custody with no visitation for Eliza, the revelations about Jason's manipulation and Eliza's genuine remorse and rehabilitation efforts led to a more balanced arrangement. Mark received primary physical custody, with Eliza having supervised visitation that would transition to unsupervised and eventually to shared custody if she continued to comply with all court requirements. 1 year after the incident, Eliza sat in a coffee shop with her therapist, Dr. Karen Phillips. They met weekly, sometimes in Dr. Phillips's office, sometimes in informal settings like this. Today they were discussing Eliza's progress and her upcoming court date to review the custody arrangement. "I'm nervous," Eliza admitted, stirring her latte absently. "What if the judge doesn't think I've changed enough?" Dr. Phillips smiled gently. "Eliza, think about where you were a year ago and where you are now. You've completed every requirement the court set for you. Your probation officer gives glowing reports. You've maintained sobriety, attended every parenting class, and never missed a therapy session. Most importantly, your supervised visits with Lily have gone extremely well." Eliza nodded, though uncertainty still clouded her eyes. "But will it ever be enough? Will I ever forgive myself completely?" "Forgiveness is a process, not an event," Dr. Phillips replied. "You've accepted responsibility for your actions. You've made amends as best you can, and you're committed to doing better. That's all any of us can do when we make mistakes, even serious ones." The next day, Eliza stood before Judge William Marshall, the same judge who had presided over her criminal case. Mark was there too, standing with his attorney across the courtroom. Though their relationship remained strained, the open hostility of the early days had gradually given way to a cautious civility for Lily's sake. The custody evaluator presented her report first, detailing Eliza's consistent progress and the strong bond she maintained with Lily, despite the limited visitation. She recommended transitioning to unsupervised visitation with an eye toward eventual shared custody. Mark's attorney argued for maintaining the status quo for at least another 6 months, citing the seriousness of Eliza's original offense. But Mark himself surprised everyone by addressing the court directly. "Your Honor," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I won't pretend what Eliza did wasn't wrong. It was, and for a long time I was so angry I couldn't see straight. But this past year I've watched her fight to be better for Lily. Our daughter lights up when she sees her mother. And I believe," he paused, glancing at Eliza, "I believe Eliza deserves the chance to be the mother she's working so hard to become." Judge Marshall considered all the testimony before rendering his decision. He granted Eliza unsupervised visitation on weekends, with a review in 6 months to consider moving toward shared custody. As Eliza left the courtroom, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time since that April night, she felt genuine hope. 3 years later, Eliza stood in her kitchen, preparing lunch while Lily, now 4.5, colored at the table. They were halfway through Eliza's weekend custody time, and tomorrow Lily would return to her father's house. The custody arrangement had evolved over time, and they now shared Lily equally, with transitions occurring Sunday evenings and Wednesday afternoons. While co-parenting with Mark would never be entirely smooth, they had found a way to work together for their daughter's benefit. Eliza had also rebuilt her life in other ways. She'd gone back to school part-time and was now working as a paralegal, with plans to eventually attend law school. Her experience with the legal system had sparked an interest in family law. particularly in cases involving custody issues and parental rights. More importantly, she had become an advocate for parents, especially single parents, speaking openly about her experience and the factors that had led to her poor decision that night. She volunteered with a community organization that provided emergency childcare and support services to single parents in crisis. "The worst night of my life taught me something crucial," she often told the parents she worked with. "There is always another option. Always. No matter how desperate or alone you feel, there are people who will help if you reach out." As she set a plate of apple slices beside Lily's artwork, Eliza reflected on how close she had come to losing everything. One decision, influenced by loneliness, manipulation, and poor judgment, had nearly cost her her daughter, her freedom, and her future. Lily looked up from her drawing and smiled, a smile so like her own that it made Eliza's heart catch. "Mommy, look, I drew our family." Eliza examined the crayon picture. Stick figures representing Lily, Eliza, Mark, and Mark's new wife, Tara, all holding hands in front of a house split down the middle. Half Mark's house, half Eliza's apartment. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Eliza said, blinking back tears. "Our perfectly imperfect family." Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Eliza sat on her balcony with a cup of tea, looking out at the lights of Meadowbrook Heights. Sometimes she still had nightmares about that night. The police breaking her car window, Lily alone and crying, the cold handcuffs around her wrists. The shame would probably never completely disappear. But alongside the shame was gratitude. Gratitude that Lily had been found before any permanent harm was done. Gratitude for the second chance she'd been given as a mother. And, strangely enough, gratitude for the harsh lessons she'd learned about responsibility, priorities, and the true meaning of love. In her darkest moments, Eliza had feared she would be forever defined by the worst decision she ever made. Instead, she had discovered that while our choices shape our lives, they need not determine our entire future. Redemption was possible. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible for those willing to accept responsibility and do the difficult work of change. As she sipped her tea, Eliza's phone buzzed with a text from Mark confirming the time he would pick up Lily tomorrow. She typed a quick response, then set the phone aside and returned her gaze to the night sky. The stars were particularly bright tonight, pinpricks of light in the darkness. Like hope, Eliza thought. Sometimes faint, sometimes distant, but always there if you look for it. This has been She Left Her Baby in the Car for a Date. Hours later, police broke the windows open from Raven Reports. If you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us bring more stories like this one to light. Until next time, I'm Morgan Blackwood, reminding you that every decision has consequences, and sometimes the most important lessons come from our darkest moments.